I will knock until you open. True story. This actually happened to me 2 years ago in a small town in Oaxaca, Mexico, the kind of place where if you screamed at midnight, only the mountains and the forest would answer back. The kind of place where the nearest hospital was a 4-hour drive away, where cell phone signals flickered in and out like dying candles, and where the old people still whispered about things that walked the roads after dark. I am going to tell you about the night that death knocked on my door, and I'm going to show you that death does not always wear the face of a demon. Sometimes it wears the face of someone you love. My name is Miguel Angel Reyes. I was 24 years old when this happened. I lived with my grandmother in an old adobe house at the edge of town where the paved road turned to dirt and the streetlights gave way to darkness. The nearest neighbor was 50 meters away. Behind our house there was nothing but pine forest stretching up into the mountains. In front of us there was a narrow path that cut through a grove of ancient oak trees, a path that the locals called Camino de los Suspiros, the Road of Sighs. They called it that because when the wind blew through the leaves at night it sounded like people sighing like souls that had lost their way and could not find the road home. I had lived with my grandmother, Abuela Rosa, since I was 12 years old. That was the year my parents died. They were on a bus heading to Mexico City for a cousin's wedding when the driver lost control on a mountain curve. The bus went over the edge. There were no survivors. I remember the day the police came to our door. I remember my grandmother's face when she heard the news. I remember thinking that the world had ended. In many ways it had. Abuela Rosa was the only family I had left. She was 78 years old, with hair as white as cloud and skin wrinkled like the bark of the old oak tree in front of our house. But her eyes were still sharp, still bright like embers that refused to die. She said she inherited those eyes from her mother, who people claimed could see things that others could not. Spirits, omens, the shadows of those who had passed on. I never believed in any of that. I thought it was just superstition, old stories that people told to scare children into behaving. I thought that until the night everything changed. My grandmother kept the old traditions alive like her life depended on it. Every year on Dia de los Muertos, she would build an ofrenda in the living room, a shrine covered with photographs of the dead marigold flowers, pan de muerto, and candles that burned through the night. She believed that the dead could visit us during those days, that the boundary between our world and theirs grew thin enough to cross. She believed that some of them never left, and she believed that sometimes they came back not to visit but to take. When I was a child, she used to sit me on her lap and tell me the rules. Never whistle at night, she would say, because it calls the spirits. Never answer if someone calls your name from the darkness because it might not be a person. And most importantly, never go outside after you have already lain down to rest, no matter who comes calling, because the one calling you might not belong to the world of the living anymore. Every night before I went to sleep, she would stand at my bedroom door and say the same thing, "Buenas noches, mijo," and remember, do not go outside. I grew up with those words like a lullaby. I also grew up to resent them. I was 24 years old. I worked 11 hours a day at the local pottery workshop, shaping clay with my hands until my fingers cracked and my back screamed for relief. I earned enough to support my grandmother and myself with a little left over for beer with my friends on weekends. I was a grown man. But every night my grandmother still treated me like a child who needed protection from monsters under the bed. The house we lived in was old, built by my great-grandfather nearly 100 years ago. The walls were thick adobe, cracked in places where time had worn them down. The floors were cold tile that made you shiver if you walked barefoot at night. In the corner of the living room stood the ofrenda, permanent now, not just for Dia de los Muertos. Photographs of my parents, my grandfather, my great-grandparents, all staring out from behind glass frames surrounded by dried marigolds and half-melted candles. The air always smelled of copal, the resin incense that my grandmother burned every evening. Mixed with that was the smell of old wood, of damp earth seeping through the walls when it rained, of time itself settling into every corner. Hanging by the front door was a wind chime made of bone, tiny white pieces strung together on leather cord. My grandmother said it was made from the bones of a saint, though I never believed her. She said it would warn us if something unholy tried to enter. Most nights it hung silent and still, but sometimes even when there was no wind it would start to move, clicking and clacking against itself like teeth chattering. My grandmother would stop whatever she was doing and listen, her eyes fixed on the door until it fell silent again. Then she would go back to her knitting or her prayers, never explaining what she had been listening for. Carlos Mendoza was my best friend. We had grown up together on the same dusty street, his house just 3 doors down from mine. Every day after school we would kick a soccer ball around on the dirt road until the sun went down and his mother called him home for dinner. When my parents died, Carlos was the first person to come to our house. He did not say anything. He did not try to comfort me with empty words. He just sat beside me for 3 days straight, not leaving my side for a moment. That was the kind of friend Carlos was. He was 2 years older than me, half a head taller, with dark skin burned even darker from working outdoors. His smile was wide and loud, the kind that made you want to smile back, even when you were in the worst mood. He worked as an electrician for the town's power company, climbing poles and handling high-voltage lines. It was dangerous work, but he never complained. "Life is short, Miguel," he used to say. "You have to live it while you can." He said that all the time. He had no idea how short his life would actually be. 8 months before that night, Carlos had married Elena, a sweet girl from the next town over. She was pregnant now, 5 months along with their first child. They had already picked out a name, Carlitos. Every time Carlos talked about his son, his eyes would light up in a way I had never seen before. He was ready to be a father. He was ready for a new chapter of his life. He did not know that he would never get to hold his son. He did not know that in less than 48 hours he would be dead. On that Saturday, I came home from work at 6 in the evening, exhausted after 11 hours of standing in front of the kiln. My hands smelled of wet clay, my back ached, and my eyes were heavy with the need for sleep. Abuela Rosa had already prepared dinner mole negro, my favorite dish. We ate together in the dim kitchen light, the way we usually did, with only the sound of the television playing the evening news in the background. That was when it happened. The first sign, the light above us flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. I looked up at the bulb. "It is going to burn out soon," I said. My grandmother did not answer right away. She was staring at the light, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Then she said very quietly, "That is not the bulb, mijo. Someone is trying to send a message." I laughed. "You and your superstitions, abuela." She did not laugh back. She just looked at me with those sharp old eyes. And for a moment I felt something brush against the back of my neck like cold fingers. Then the light steadied and the feeling passed. After dinner I went to take a shower. The bathroom was small, barely big enough for a toilet, a sink, and a shower head mounted on the wall. The tiles were old and cracked, and no matter how much you scrubbed, there was always a faint smell of mildew in the corners. I was standing under the water, letting it wash away the tiredness of the day, when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the bathroom door. "Abuela," I called out. "Did you need something?" Her voice came from the living room, far away. "I did not call you." I turned off the water. The bathroom was silent. I stood there dripping, listening. Nothing. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. The house was quiet. Must have been the pipes, I told myself. Old houses make strange noises. But I knew the difference between pipes groaning and knuckles rapping against wood. And that sound had been knuckles. I dried off and went to my room. It was nearly 10 o'clock. My body was begging for sleep. I lay down on my bed, pulled the thin blanket over myself, and closed my eyes. That was when I felt it, the sensation of being watched. It was not a sound. It was not a movement. It was just a feeling deep in my gut that someone was standing in the corner of my room staring at me through the darkness. I opened my eyes and looked. The corner was empty. just shadows pooling where the moonlight could not reach. You are tired, I told myself. You are imagining things. Go to sleep. I closed my eyes again, but the feeling did not go away. It stayed there pressing against my skin until I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. I do not know how long I slept, an hour, maybe 2, but I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. The screen glowed in the darkness. Carlos calling. I looked at the time, 11:47 p.m., almost midnight. I picked up the phone. "Hey, Miguel." Carlos's voice was loud, a little slurred from beer. "What are you doing sleeping?" I said, my voice thick with grogginess. "Sleeping on a Saturday night? Come on, man. Me and Javier are at the bar. There are some beautiful girls here. You need to come." "No, I am too tired. Tired. You are 24 years old, not 80. Stop acting like an old man and get over here. I will buy you a beer." I sat up in bed. Part of me wanted to go. Part of me wanted to escape this house, this feeling of being watched, this suffocating routine of work and sleep and nothing else. But another part of me, a deeper part, was whispering that I should stay where I was. I do not know Carlos. It is late. Late, the night is just getting started. Come on, do not be boring. I was about to answer when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Heavy. The footsteps of an old woman who carried the weight of decades on her shoulders. My door opened. Abuela Rosa stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the moonlight coming through the window behind her. Her white hair hung loose around her shoulders. Her eyes caught the light and seemed to glow. "Who is calling?" she asked. "Carlos," I said. "He wants me to go out with him. You cannot go." It was not a question, it was not a suggestion, it was a command. "Abuela, I am 24 years old. You have already lain down." She stepped into the room. "You cannot go outside now. That is just superstition. It is not superstition." Her voice cracked, and I realized with a shock that she was crying. Tears were streaming down her wrinkled cheeks, catching the moonlight like tiny rivers. "I have a feeling, mijo, a terrible feeling. Something is waiting for you tonight. Something is out there calling your name. Please, do not go. I cannot lose anyone else." I stared at her. In all my years of living with her, I had never seen her cry. Not when my grandfather died. Not when my parents died. Not once. And here she was standing in my doorway at midnight, tears running down her face, begging me not to go outside. I lifted the phone to my ear. "Carlos, yeah, I cannot make it. I'm sick. Stomach problems." It was a lie. We both knew it was a lie. But I could not tell him the truth. I could not tell him that my grandmother was standing here crying because of some old belief that I had dismissed my entire life. "All right, man," Carlos said. I could hear the disappointment in his voice. "Next time, then." "Yeah, next time." I hung up. My grandmother stood there for a moment longer, the tears drying on her cheeks. Then she nodded slowly like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She turned to leave. But before she closed the door, she said something that I will never forget. "Death was calling you tonight, mijo. I did not let it in." The door clicked shut. I lay in the darkness, my heart pounding, staring at the ceiling. Sleep would not come. I tossed and turned, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. The house was too quiet. The air was too heavy. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I kept hearing my grandmother's words over and over again. Death was calling you tonight. I did not let it in. At 12:35 a.m. I heard it. A sound from far away. The screech of tires, the crunch of metal against metal, the shattering of glass. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. Probably just some drunk driver, I told myself. Probably just an accident on the highway. Nothing to do with me. I lay back down. I closed my eyes. I did not know that Carlos had just died. I did not know that the sound I heard was his Nissan Suru going over the edge of the bridge at Rio Grande, tumbling 30 meters into the ravine below. I did not know that the clock on his dashboard had stopped at exactly 12:35 a.m., the moment of impact. and I did not know that Carlos would come back, to finish what he started, to take me with him. I woke up on Sunday morning with a weight pressing down on my chest that I could not explain. The light coming through my window seemed dimmer than usual, as if the sun itself was struggling to break through some invisible barrier. The air in my room felt wrong, heavy with something I could not name. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember my dreams. They had been strange, fragmented. Carlos had been in them, standing on a dark road, waving at me, calling my name. But his voice had sounded wrong, like it was coming from very far away, from somewhere beneath the earth. And his face, though I could not remember the details now, had looked different somehow, like a photograph left out in the rain. I shook my head and sat up. The bone wind chime by the front door was making noise, that soft clicking and clacking, even though my window was closed, and I could not feel any breeze. It had been doing that all night, off and on, like something was pacing back and forth outside, setting it off each time it passed. Downstairs I could hear my grandmother moving around in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of pots and pans, the hiss of the stove being lit. The smell of coffee began to drift up through the floorboards. Everything seemed normal. Everything was exactly as it should be. So why did I feel like something terrible had happened? I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up, and I opened my messages and typed a quick text to Carlos. "Hey, how was last night? Did I miss anything good?" I watched the message send. The little indicator showed that it had been delivered, but the second check mark, the one that meant it had been read, never appeared. Carlos always had his phone with him. He was the kind of person who checked his messages every 5 minutes, who responded to texts within seconds. If I sent him something, he would respond almost immediately, even if it was just a stupid emoji or a one-word answer. But the minutes passed, and there was nothing. 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. I told myself it was nothing. He probably drank too much last night. He was probably still asleep, passed out in his bed with Elena curled up beside him. He would wake up eventually, see my message, and respond with some joke about how I had missed the party of the century. That was what I told myself. But the feeling in my chest only grew heavier. At noon, I tried calling him. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a recorded voice came on. "The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. Please try again later." I called again. Same result. I called Elena. Same result. Both of their phones were off, or dead, or something. It is nothing, I told myself. Maybe they went somewhere. Maybe they are visiting Elena's parents in the next town. Maybe their phones ran out of battery. There were 100 explanations, 1,000, all of them perfectly reasonable. But logic could not explain the knot forming in my stomach or the way my hands had started to tremble. I went downstairs. My grandmother was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold in front of her. She was not drinking it. She was just staring at it, her eyes unfocused, her lips moving slightly as if she was praying. "Abuela," I said, "have you heard anything about Carlos?" She looked up at me. Her face was pale and there were dark circles under her eyes. "No, mijo. I have not heard anything." "I tried calling him. His phone is off." She nodded slowly, as if this did not surprise her. Then she went back to staring at her coffee. I stood there for a moment, waiting for her to say something else. When she did not, I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. "Where are you going to Carlos's house? I want to make sure everything is okay." She stood up so fast that her chair scraped against the floor. "Do not go, Abuela. I am just going to check on him." "Do not go," she said again, and there was something in her voice that I had never heard before, a desperate edge that made me stop with my hand on the doorknob. "Stay here, mijo, please. Stay here with me today." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that she was being ridiculous, that I was just going to walk 3 houses down the street, that nothing bad was going to happen in broad daylight. But then I looked at her eyes, and I saw fear, real fear. I let go of the doorknob. At 3 in the afternoon, I could not take it anymore. I told my grandmother that I was going to the bathroom. Instead, I slipped out the back door and made my way down the street to Carlos's house. The sun was high overhead, blazing down on the dusty road. It was the kind of day that should have felt safe, should have felt normal. But as I walked, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone behind me, but the street was empty, just dust and sunlight and the distant sound of a dog barking. Yet the feeling persisted, that prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Carlos's house was a small concrete structure painted bright blue, with a rusted metal gate and a yard full of potted plants. When I reached the gate, I stopped. Something was wrong. The curtains in all the windows were drawn. The gate was locked. There was no sound from inside, no movement. And Carlos's car, the old Nissan Tsuru that he loved more than almost anything, was not parked in its usual spot. I rattled the gate. "Carlos," I called out. "Elena, are you home?" No answer. I walked around to the side of the house looking for another way in. The back gate was also locked. The windows were all closed. But as I stood there staring up at the second floor, I saw something. The curtain in the bedroom window moved, just a little, just a twitch, like someone had been standing there watching me and had quickly stepped back. "Elena," I called, "is that you? Nothing?" The curtain was still now, but I could have sworn that for just a moment I had seen a shape behind it, a dark shape standing very still. I stood there for a long time waiting, but nothing else moved. I was about to leave when I heard it, a voice so faint that I almost missed it carried on the wind. "Miguel." I spun around. The street behind me was empty. "Miguel. Come here." The voice was coming from everywhere and nowhere, and I recognized it even though it sounded wrong, even though it sounded like it was being spoken through a throat full of dirt. It was Carlos's voice. I ran. I ran all the way back to my grandmother's house, not stopping until I was inside with the door locked behind me. My heart was pounding so hard that I could feel it in my temples. My grandmother was standing in the hallway looking at me. She did not ask where I'd been. She did not ask what had happened. She just looked at me with those ancient eyes and said very quietly, "You heard him, did you not?" I could not answer. I could not speak. She nodded as if my silence was all the confirmation she needed. That night I did not sleep. I lay in my bed with the lights on, staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound the house made. The creak of the old wood settling, the distant howl of wind through the pine trees, the soft clicking of the bone wind chime by the front door. At some point the streetlight outside my window went out. Not flickered, not dimmed, just went out as if someone had reached up and unscrewed the bulb. My room was suddenly darker, the shadows in the corners deeper, and then the temperature dropped. It happened so fast that I could feel it on my skin like a physical thing. My breath started coming out in white clouds. Frost began to form on the inside of my window, creeping across the glass in patterns that looked almost like fingers. I pulled my blanket up to my chin, my body shaking. And then I smelled it. The smell of wet earth, the smell of rotting flowers, the smell of something that had been buried and was now clawing its way back up. I wanted to call out for my grandmother. I wanted to scream for help, but my voice was frozen in my throat. And then the knocking started. Knock, knock, knock. It came from downstairs, from the front door. 3 slow knocks evenly spaced. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking was patient, deliberate, like whoever was on the other side had all the time in the world. I looked at my phone. The screen glowed in the darkness. 3:0 a.m. I got out of bed. I do not know why. I do not know what force compelled me to walk to my bedroom door and open it and step out into the hallway, but I did. The house was dark, darker than it should have been. The shadows seemed to press against me like living things as I made my way down the stairs. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was louder now. I reached the front door and I heard breathing, not my own breathing, something else, something on the other side of the door, Heavy, labored breaths like someone who had been running for a very long time. "Who is there?" I whispered. No answer, just that breathing, in and out, in and out. I reached for the door handle. "Do not open that door, mijo." My grandmother's voice cut through the darkness. I turned and saw her standing at the top of the stairs, wrapped in her white nightgown. "Abuela, someone is. No one living is standing outside that door. Knock, knock, knock." The knocking was more insistent now, faster. "Come back upstairs," my grandmother said. "Now." But I could not move. I stood there frozen, my hand hovering over the door handle. Knock, knock, knock. The door shuddered in its frame. The bone wind chime was going crazy now, clattering and clanking. "Miguel," the voice came from outside. "Miguel, open the door." It was Carlos's voice, but it was wrong, distorted, like it was being spoken underwater or from the bottom of a deep hole. "Open the door. I promised I would come for you." I felt my hand reaching for the handle, moving on its own. And then my grandmother was beside me, grabbing my arm, pulling me back. "Do not," she hissed. "Whatever you do, do not open that door." She dragged me up the stairs into her room and locked the door behind us. The knocking continued for another 30 minutes. "Knock, knock, knock, Miguel! Open the door, Miguel, I came for you." Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was a heavy silence, a silence that pressed against my eardrums, a silence that felt like something waiting. My grandmother sat in the corner of her room, her rosary clutched in her hands. She did not stop praying until the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains. Only then did she look at me and say in a voice that was barely more than a whisper, "I saw him, mijo." When he was knocking, I looked through the crack in the door and I saw him standing there. "What did you see?" She closed her eyes. His eyes were wrong, completely wrong. And his shadow was not moving with him. It stayed still on the ground while he walked back and forth in front of our door. I wanted to tell her that she was wrong, that she had imagined it, but I could not. Because deep down in a place that I did not want to acknowledge, I knew she was telling the truth. The next morning, Monday, my phone would not work properly. I picked it up and pressed the power button. The screen flickered on, then off. On, then off, like something was playing with it. When it finally stayed on, I opened my messages. Everything was gone. Every conversation I had ever had with Carlos, every text, every photo, all of it had vanished, like he had never existed. I went downstairs. My grandmother was in the kitchen. When I walked in, the light above the stove flickered and went out. We stood there in the dim morning light looking at the dead bulb. "The power is fine in the rest of the house," I said. I checked. She nodded. "It is not the power." "Then what is it?" She did not answer. She just poured her coffee and sat down at the table, staring at nothing. At 10 o'clock, I went to the pottery workshop. I needed to get out of the house. I needed to see other people, to hear other voices, to convince myself that the world was still real and solid and sane. But when I walked through the door, Señor Hernandez was waiting for me. "Miguel," he said, "have you heard about the accident?" "What accident?" "On the road to the Rio Grande Bridge. A car went off the edge Saturday night. They just found it this morning." My heart stopped. "Do they know who was in the car?" "Not yet, but I heard it was a blue Nissan Tsuru." The workshop seemed to spin around me. I grabbed the edge of a table to keep from falling. "When did it happen?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Saturday night. Around midnight, they think." The clock on the dashboard stopped at 12:35. 12:35. Less than an hour after Carlos had called me. Less than an hour after I had refused to go out with him. Less than an hour after my grandmother had stood in my doorway and told me that death was calling. I ran out of the workshop without another word. By the time I got home, my grandmother was waiting on the front porch. She did not have to tell me. I could see it in her face. "They found Carlos's car, mijo. He is dead." The words hit me like a physical blow. When Saturday night, he drove off the bridge at Rio Grande. The car fell 30 meters. I remembered the sound I had heard that night. The screech of tires, the crunch of metal. I had heard Carlos die, and I had done nothing. But abuela, I said, my voice shaking. The knocking last night. Carlos died on Saturday. How could he have been at our door on Sunday night? She sat down beside me and took my hand. The old traditions tell us that the dead do not always know they are dead, mijo. They wander for a time confused, trying to return to the places they knew, the people they loved. Sometimes they come back to say goodbye, and sometimes they come back to take someone with them. Take someone? She squeezed my hand. Carlos loved you like a brother. He did not want to go alone into the darkness. He came back for you, but I did not go. No, you did not, because I did not let you. I sat there for a long time trying to process everything. My best friend was dead, and he had come back for me. That evening I found the flower. I was sitting in my room when I noticed something on my desk that had not been there before. A marigold. A single orange marigold flower, the kind we put on the ofrendas for the dead. It was fresh, still wet with dew, and beneath it there was a piece of paper. I picked it up with trembling hands. The writing was in pencil, scrawled and uneven. Come to my house. I recognized the handwriting. It was Carlos's handwriting, but Carlos was dead. His body was probably still at the bottom of that ravine. How could he have left this here? I showed it to my grandmother. She looked at it for a long time. He is not going to stop, she finally said. He has marked you, mijo. He has chosen you. And he will keep coming back until you either go with him or find a way to send him away. How do I send him away? I do not know. She looked at me with eyes full of sorrow. But I know that you cannot let him in. No matter what he says, no matter how much he sounds like the friend you knew, you cannot let him in. Because that thing that comes to our door at night, that is not Carlos anymore. It wears his face, but inside it is something else, something hungry. I looked at the marigold on my desk. I have to go to the funeral, I said. I have to say goodbye. My grandmother nodded slowly. Yes, you must. But go during the day, stay with other people, and no matter what happens, come home before the sun goes down. Do not let the darkness catch you outside. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a silver chain with a small cross hanging from it. This belonged to my grandmother, she said. It has protected our family for 4 generations. It will protect you too. I took the chain and put it around my neck. The metal was cool against my skin, but as I held the cross in my palm, I could have sworn I felt a faint warmth emanating from it. Remember, my grandmother said, the dead are strongest in the dark, but they cannot enter where they are not invited. Do not invite him in, mijo, no matter how much it hurts. No matter how much you want to see him one last time, do not invite him in. I promised her I would be careful. I promised her I would come home before dark. That night the knocking came again. 3 a.m. exactly. Knock, knock, knock. But this time it was not at the front door. It was at my bedroom window, my bedroom on the 2nd floor. I lay frozen in my bed, listening, feeling the cold seep through the glass, smelling that terrible smell of earth and decay. And then his voice muffled by the window. Miguel, I know you can hear me. I did not move. I did not breathe. Miguel, I am still waiting for you. I squeezed my eyes shut and clutched the silver cross. I will always wait for you. The knocking continued until dawn, and when I finally gathered the courage to look out my window as the first rays of sunlight touched the ground, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Footprints, leading from the road across our yard up to the wall beneath my window, but not leading away. Whatever had stood outside my window last night had come, but it had never left. Wednesday morning arrived with a sky the color of ash. The funeral was today. I had not slept more than a few minutes at a time since Saturday night, and my body was beginning to feel the effects. My hands trembled when I tried to hold my coffee cup. My eyes burned with exhaustion but refused to close. Every shadow made me flinch. Every creak of the old house made my heart stutter. I put on my only black clothes, a pair of dress pants, and a button-down shirt that smelled faintly of mothballs. The silver chain with the cross hung around my neck, resting against my chest. I had not taken it off since my grandmother gave it to me. My grandmother was waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked older than I had ever seen her, as if the past few days had aged her by a decade. She pressed a small cloth bag into my palm. "Salt and rosemary," she said. "Keep it in your pocket. Do not take it out for any reason." I nodded and slipped the bag into my pants. "Remember what I told you. Stay with other people. Do not go anywhere alone. And come home before the sun sets. Whatever happens, whatever you see, whatever you hear, come home before dark. I will, abuela." She grabbed my hand and held it tight. "I mean it, mijo. Promise me, I promise." She let go of my hand and stepped back, but her eyes never left mine. There was something in her gaze that I could not quite identify, something beyond fear. It looked almost like grief, as if she was already mourning something that had not yet been lost. I left the house at 11 in the morning when the sun was high and the streets were filled with people. The walk to Carlos's house took me through the center of town, past the small plaza with its crumbling fountain, past the church with its faded white walls, past the market where old women sold vegetables from wooden stalls. Everywhere I went, I heard people talking about the accident. "Did you hear about the Mendoza boy? Such a tragedy. They say the car went straight off the bridge, 30 meters down. His poor wife, pregnant with their first child." I walked faster, trying to escape the whispers. I was so lost in thought that I almost did not notice when I passed the cemetery. It was a small plot of land surrounded by a low stone wall filled with weathered crosses and crumbling headstones. Most of the graves were decorated with faded plastic flowers and sun-bleached photographs. I had walked past this cemetery thousands of times in my life. I had never given it a second thought. But today, something made me stop. A feeling, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. I turned and looked, scanning the rows of headstones, the ancient oak trees that cast long shadows across the ground. There was no one there, just stone and dirt and the rustling of leaves. I was about to turn away when I saw it, a figure standing behind one of the larger monuments near the back. It was too far away to make out details, but I could see enough to know that it was a man and that he was wearing a blue shirt just like the one Carlos had been wearing the last time I saw him. I blinked. The figure was gone. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding my eyes, searching the cemetery for any sign of movement. But there was nothing, just the wind stirring the dead leaves. "You are imagining things," I told myself. "You are tired and stressed, and your mind is playing tricks." But I could not shake the feeling that I had seen something real, that somewhere among those graves something was watching me. I walked the rest of the way to Carlos's house without stopping. The house was full of people. They spilled out onto the street, crowding the sidewalk, filling the small yard with their black clothes and their quiet murmurs. I recognized most of them neighbors and co-workers and distant relatives. They nodded at me as I passed. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of marigolds and burning copal. An ofrenda had been set up in the corner of the living room, a towering altar covered with photographs of Carlos at every age. Candles flickered among the pictures, their flames dancing in the still air. And in the center of the room, surrounded by flowers and weeping relatives, was the coffin. It was open. I had known it would be. In our culture, we do not hide from death, we face it directly. But knowing this did not prepare me for the reality of seeing my best friend lying in a box lined with white silk. I approached slowly, my legs heavy, my breath shallow. They had dressed him in his wedding suit. They had combed his hair neatly to one side and placed a rosary between his fingers. They had done their best to make him look peaceful, but they could not hide everything. His skin was the wrong color, a grayish-white that no amount of makeup could fully conceal. His lips were painted an unnatural red. His cheeks were sunken, his jaw too rigid. And his eyes were closed, but the lids were not still. They trembled slightly, twitching every few seconds. I stood there staring down at the body of my best friend. This is not him, I thought. This thing in this box, this is not Carlos. I leaned closer, my lips moving in a whispered prayer. Carlos. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I did not go with you that night. I am so sorry if you died because of me. Please forgive me. Please rest in peace. Please stop coming to my door." As I spoke, his eyelids twitched more violently, as if he could hear me, as if he was trying to respond. I stepped back quickly, my skin crawling. "It is just your imagination," I told myself. "Dead bodies twitch sometimes. It is just muscles contracting." But I did not believe it, not anymore. I found Elena in a corner of the room, sitting alone on a wooden chair, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "Elena," I said softly, "I am so sorry." She looked up at me. "Miguel," she said, "you were his best friend." I nodded. "He loved you like a brother." "Did you know that he talked about you all the time? He worried about you living alone with your grandmother, never going out. He wanted to help you. I know. I loved him too." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone. Carlos's phone. The screen was cracked, the case dented and scratched. "The police gave this back to me yesterday," she said. "They found it in the car. Somehow it survived the crash." She held it out to me. "There is something on here that you need to see. A message that Carlos sent on the night he died. A message to you." I took the phone with trembling hands. The screen was smeared with something dark. I wiped it clean and opened the messaging app. There was only one conversation visible. A conversation with me. I scrolled to the last message. It was sent at 12:31 a.m. on Sunday morning, 4 minutes before the clock on Carlos's dashboard had stopped forever. The message read, "Miguel, I know you are already asleep, but I am worried about you. You live with your grandmother. You never go out. You never have any fun. I'm coming to pick you up right now. Do not try to say no. I will knock on your door until you open it, I promise." I read the message again and again. "I will knock on your door until you open it." The knocking that had started Sunday night at 3 a.m. Carlos had kept his promise. Even death had not stopped him. I gave the phone back to Elena without a word. I stayed at the funeral until 4 in the afternoon. People came and went, offering condolences, sharing memories. I listened to them all, nodding at the right moments, but my mind was somewhere else. I kept thinking about the message on Carlos's phone. I kept thinking about the knocking on my door. At 4:30, I realized that the sun was getting low. I had promised my grandmother that I would be home before dark. I said my goodbyes to Elena, to Carlos's parents, to the other mourners. Then I slipped out the back door and started walking home. The logical route would have taken me back through the center of town along well-lit streets filled with people. But the logical route was longer. At least 20 minutes on foot. The shortcut through Camino de los Suspiros was only 10. I stood at the entrance to the path, looking into the tunnel of trees that stretched ahead. The oak branches arched overhead, blocking out most of the sky. The ground was covered with fallen leaves. "It will be fine," I told myself. "You have walked this path 100 times. It is only 10 minutes. You will be home long before sunset." I stepped onto the path. The change was immediate. The sounds of the town faded away, replaced by a silence so complete that it felt like a physical presence. The air grew colder, damper, carrying with it the smell of rotting leaves and wet earth. I walked faster, my footsteps crunching on the dead leaves, my eyes fixed on the path ahead. About halfway down I heard it, another set of footsteps, behind me, matching my pace exactly. I stopped. The footsteps behind me stopped too, but a half-second too late, one extra crunch echoing through the silence. I turned around. The path behind me was empty. "Hello," I called out. "Is someone there?" No answer, just the wind stirring the leaves. I turned back and started walking again, faster this time. The footsteps resumed, right behind me. I did not turn around this time. I did not stop. I just kept moving my hand, clutching the silver cross beneath my shirt. And then I heard the voice. "Miguel." It came from everywhere at once, a whisper that was barely louder than the wind. "Miguel, come here." I knew that voice. It was the voice of my best friend, but it was wrong, distorted, like a recording played at the wrong speed. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere deep underground. "Miguel, I have been waiting for you." I ran. I ran as fast as I could, my legs pumping, my lungs burning. Branches whipped against my face, leaving stinging welts. Roots grabbed at my feet, and twice I nearly fell. Behind me, the footsteps grew louder, faster, closer. And the voice grew clearer. "Miguel, why are you running? I just want to talk to you. I just want you to come with me." I did not answer. I did not look back. I just ran. The path curved ahead, and through the trees I could see something. A shape standing in the middle of the road. I skidded to a stop. It was Carlos. He stood beneath the largest oak tree on the path, the one that the locals called El Abuelo. The trunk was massive, and its branches spread out like a canopy, blocking whatever light remained. Carlos was wearing the blue shirt he had worn on Saturday night, the same jeans, the same sneakers. He looked exactly as he had looked the last time I saw him alive, except for his eyes. Where his eyes should have been, there were only two dark voids, deeper than any shadow, deeper than the night itself. And his shadow. I could see his shadow on the ground behind him, but it was not moving with him. It stood perfectly still while Carlos himself swayed from side to side, his head tilted at an angle that no living neck could maintain. "Carlos," I whispered. He smiled. It was not a human smile. It was too wide, stretching his cheeks until I could see all of his teeth. "Miguel," he said, "I have been waiting for you. Carlos, you are dead. You died on Saturday night." "Dead?" He tilted his head even further. "What is dead? I am right here. I am standing right in front of you. Does that seem dead to you?" He took a step toward me. No sound. His feet touched the ground, but there was no crunch of leaves. It was like watching a film with the sound turned off. "I came for you, Miguel, just like I promised. I knocked on your door, but you did not answer. I called your name, but you did not come. So now I'm here, and I'm going to take you home with me." He took another step, and another. Each step brought him closer, and with each step the smell grew stronger, that terrible smell of rotting flowers and decay. The silver cross against my chest began to grow warm. "I do not want to go with you," I said. "Please, Carlos, just rest. Just let go. You do not belong here anymore." His smile disappeared. "I do not belong here." His voice changed, deepening as if it was coming from multiple throats at once. "I do not belong here. You are the one who does not belong, Miguel. You should have died with me. You should have been in that car when it went over the edge. But you were not, because you stayed home, because you listened to your grandmother." He was close now, close enough that I could see the way his skin had changed, the network of dark veins visible beneath the surface, the patches where the flesh seemed to be rotting away. "Do you know what it is like?" he asked. "Do you know what it is like to die alone in the dark, to feel your body breaking your life, slipping away with no one there to help you? I called for you, Miguel. I called and called, but you never came. I did not know, I said. I did not know you were going to die. But now you do." He reached out a hand toward me. "And now you are going to come with me. You owe me that much, Miguel. You owe me your life." His hand touched my face. The cold was indescribable. It was the cold of the void, the cold of empty space. And with the cold came something else, a pulling sensation deep in my chest, as if invisible fingers had wrapped around my heart and were trying to drag it out. I looked into Carlos's eyes, those empty holes, and I saw something inside them. A world. A dark world, stretching endlessly in all directions, filled with shapes that moved and writhed and reached toward me with desperate, grasping hands. There were thousands of them, tens of thousands, all the souls that had been pulled into that void over centuries. They wanted me. They wanted me to join them, and Carlos was going to make sure that I did. "No," I whispered, but my voice was barely audible. "Yes," Carlos said, and his voice was no longer his own. "You are mine now, Miguel. You have always been mine. From the moment I died, your fate was sealed. You cannot escape." The pulling grew stronger. I could feel myself being torn apart, my body remaining on the path, while something essential was being ripped away. The silver cross on my chest was burning now so hot that I could smell my own skin searing. And then it happened. A flash of light, pure white and blinding bright, exploded from the cross and struck Carlos full in the face. He screamed. It was a sound that no human throat could make, a shriek of pure rage and pain. He stumbled backward, his hands clawing at his face, smoke rising from between his fingers. The pulling sensation stopped. The cold receded. I did not hesitate. I turned and ran. I ran faster than I had ever run in my life. Branches tore at my clothes and skin, leaving long, bloody scratches. Roots grabbed at my feet. Behind me I heard Carlos, Miguel. His voice was a roar, a thunderous bellow that echoed through the forest. "Miguel, come back!" I did not look back. I did not slow down. I just ran. "Miguel, you cannot escape me. I will find you. I will always find you." The trees were thinning ahead. I could see light, real light, the orange glow of street lamps. "Miguel, I will wait for you. I will wait forever." I burst out of the forest and onto the paved road, my feet slapping against asphalt, my body collapsing under the hard ground. I lay there for a long moment, gasping for breath, staring up at the darkening sky. But I was alive. I was out of the forest. I was safe. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself up and looked back at the path. The entrance to Camino de los Suspiros was dark now, a tunnel of shadow. And standing at the edge of that darkness, right where the path met the road, was Carlos. He was not moving. He was just standing there, his empty eyes fixed on me. He could not cross. Whatever barrier existed between the darkness of the forest and the light of the street, he could not pass it. And then he spoke one last time, his voice carrying across the distance. "I will wait for you, Miguel. I will wait until you are ready. And when you finally come to me, when you finally open that door or step into that darkness or close your eyes for the last time, I will be there. I will always be there, because you are mine, and the dead do not give up what belongs to them." He turned and walked back into the forest, disappearing into the shadows, fading away until there was nothing left. I got to my feet and ran the rest of the way home. My grandmother was waiting at the door when I arrived. She took one look at my face, at the scratches on my skin and the terror in my eyes, and she knew. "You saw him," she said, "on the path." I nodded, unable to speak. She pulled me inside, locked the door, and began performing rituals that I did not understand, burning herbs and sprinkling salt and murmuring prayers in a language I had never heard. I sat on the floor in the middle of the living room, shaking uncontrollably. After what felt like hours, she knelt down beside me and began examining my wounds. But when she pulled down the collar of my shirt to check the burn from the cross, she went very still. "Mijo," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look." I looked down at my chest. The cross had left a mark on my skin, a red welt in the shape of the crucifix. But that was not what my grandmother was looking at. Next to the cross mark on the left side of my chest, directly over my heart, there was another mark, a handprint. 5 fingers, perfectly formed, burned into my flesh like a brand. "He marked you," my grandmother said. "He touched your heart, and now he has marked you as his own." "What does that mean?" She looked at me with eyes full of fear. "It means he will not stop. He will come back night after night until he gets what he wants. The mark is a claim, mijo. It is his way of saying that you belong to him now, and the dead do not give up what they have claimed." I looked down at the handprint on my chest. It was cold, even though the rest of my body was warm. And as I stared at it, I could have sworn that I felt it pulse just once, like a heartbeat, like something waiting to wake up. That night, the knocking came again. 3 a.m. exactly. Knock, knock, knock. But this time it did not come from the front door or the back door or even my bedroom window. It came from inside the walls. 3 weeks passed. I did not leave the house. I did not go to work. I did not answer the phone when it rang. I just sat in my room with the curtains drawn and the door locked, waiting for the sun to rise and dreading the moment it would set again. My body was falling apart. The scratches on my face and arms had scabbed over, but they itched constantly. My eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. I had lost weight because every time I tried to eat, the smell of food reminded me of that other smell, and my stomach would rebel. But worst of all was the handprint. It had not healed. The skin around it had turned a grayish color, and the edges seemed to be spreading, creeping outward across my chest. It was always cold, and sometimes late at night I could feel it pulse against my ribs. My grandmother did everything she could. She burned sage and copal until the house was thick with smoke. She hung crosses over every door and window. She sprinkled salt across the thresholds and recited prayers that she had learned from her grandmother. But nothing seemed to work. Every night at 3 a.m. the knocking came. Sometimes it was at the front door. Sometimes it was at my window. Sometimes it was inside the walls themselves, traveling through the house like something searching for a way in. And every night I heard his voice. Miguel, open the door. Miguel, let me in. Miguel, I am waiting. I tried to tell myself that it was not real, that I was hallucinating from stress and exhaustion, but the handprint on my chest was real. The scratches on my skin were real. The marigold that appeared on my pillow every morning fresh and wet with dew was real. Carlos was real, and he was not going to stop. One night I looked in the mirror. I was standing in the bathroom washing my face, trying to feel something other than fear. The water was cold against my skin, and I kept my eyes closed as I splashed it over my cheeks. But eventually I had to look. I raised my head and opened my eyes, and I saw him. Not in the bathroom. Not standing behind me, but in the mirror itself, in the reflection, standing in the corner of the room where there was nothing but empty space. He was wearing the same blue shirt, and his eyes, those terrible, empty eyes, were fixed on me. I spun around. The corner was empty. I looked back at the mirror. He was still there, and he was closer now. One step closer than he had been a moment before. I watched as he took another step, and another, moving through the reflected room, getting closer and closer to the reflected version of me. His lips moved. No sound came out, but I could read the words. I am still waiting. He was right behind my reflection now, close enough to touch. His arm began to rise. I screamed and punched the mirror. The glass shattered, slicing into my knuckles. Blood dripped from my hand onto the white tiles. I stood there gasping, staring at the broken mirror, at the dozen fragmented reflections staring back at me. He was gone. But in every shard and every piece of broken glass, I could see the corner of the bathroom behind me. And in every shard the corner was dark, darker than it should have been, as if something was standing there just out of sight. I did not turn around. I bandaged my hand and left the bathroom without looking back. 2 months after the funeral, he came inside. It was 3 a.m. The knocking had started at the usual time, beginning at the front door and traveling through the house. I lay in my bed, the covers pulled up to my chin, the silver cross clutched in my bandaged hand. Front door, side window, back door, kitchen wall, hallway, ceiling, and then silence. I held my breath. The knocking started again, but this time it was not coming from the walls. It was coming from my bedroom door, from the inside of my bedroom door, as if something was standing in the hallway just on the other side, knocking to be let out rather than in. Knock, knock, knock. I stared at the door. The doorknob began to turn, slowly, deliberately. The door swung open. Darkness spilled in from the hallway, thick and heavy, not the ordinary darkness of night, but something deeper, something that seemed to swallow the light. And in that darkness I saw eyes, empty eyes. Miguel, the darkness whispered, "It is time." I squeezed my own eyes shut and clutched the cross so hard that I felt the metal cut into my palm. I prayed. I prayed harder than I had ever prayed in my life, calling on God and Jesus and Mary and every saint whose name I could remember. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The cold receded, the darkness lifted. I opened my eyes. The door was closed. The hallway beyond was empty. I sat up in bed, my whole body shaking. And then I saw it. On my desk, where nothing had been before, there was a marigold, and beneath it, a piece of paper. I got up on trembling legs and walked to the desk. I picked up the paper and held it up to the light. The words were written in something dark and rust-colored, something that flaked off onto my fingers when I touched it. The message was short, only 5 words. Your turn is coming soon. That was 2 years ago. I am telling you this story now because I need someone to know. I need someone to understand what is happening to me. What has been happening to me every night since my best friend drove his car off a bridge and came back to claim me. Carlos still comes every night, 3 a.m., without fail. The knocking starts at the front door and travels through the house, getting closer each time. First it was the walls. Then it was my bedroom door. Then it was the floor beneath my bed. Last night it was inside my closet. The handprint on my chest has spread. It covers most of my left side now, a gray stain that pulses with cold, that aches when the sun goes down. My grandmother says there is nothing more she can do. The old protections are failing. The salt lines do not hold him back anymore. The prayers grow weaker each night. Soon, she says, there will be nothing left between me and the darkness. Soon I will have to answer the door. But there is something else I need to tell you. Something I only realized recently as I was writing down this story, trying to make sense of everything that has happened. The curse does not stay with one person. It spreads through stories, through words, through the simple act of listening. When I told my cousin about what happened, she started hearing knocking at her door at 3 a.m. When I told my coworker, he found a marigold on his pillow the next morning. The story itself is the infection, and now you have heard it. If you are listening to this, if you are lying in your bed right now, safe and warm and comfortable, I need you to understand something. You are not safe anymore. By listening to this story, you have invited something in. You have opened a door that cannot be closed. You have made yourself visible to things that were not looking for you before. If you have already lain down to rest, do not go outside. Do not answer the phone if someone calls you in the middle of the night. Do not open the door no matter who is knocking, because the one who is calling you, the one who is knocking, the one who is whispering your name through the darkness, they might not be alive anymore. And if you answer them, if you let them in, if you step outside to meet them, you will never come back. The dead do not give up what belongs to them. And once they have marked you, once they have claimed you, once they have decided that you are theirs, there is no escape. There is only waiting. Waiting for the night when you are too tired to fight, waiting for the moment when your defenses finally fall, waiting for the knock that you cannot ignore. Do you hear that? That sound right now, wherever you are, that soft tapping like knuckles against wood? Listen carefully. Knock, knock, knock. That is not the wind. That is not your imagination. That is not the house settling. Someone is at your door. Someone who has been waiting for you. Someone who traveled a very long way to find you. And they will keep knocking. All night, every night. Until you finally open that door. Until you finally step outside. Until you finally join them in the darkness. So I will ask you one last time. Do you hear the knocking? Are you going to answer?